for the time being. Welcome, everyone. My name is David Lee Preston, and I am a proud, longtime member of Sons and Daughters of Holocaust Survivors of Greater Philadelphia. Welcome to our March 2024 book program. This is our third monthly book program of the year. Our group was founded in 1979. We are one of the first organizations of its kind and still going strong. We have no dues or officers, but we do have a passion for truth and a bond formed by shared experience. We're an active, vibrant, and welcoming organization. If you are a child of survivors and you live in the Philadelphia area and you're interested in joining, please drop us a note on our group's website or on our Facebook page, or contact me directly through my website or through Facebook, or leave a note in the chat and we'll reach out to you. These free monthly Zoom programs are at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Sundays, and they are recorded and can be found on my YouTube channel within a day or two of the program. You will want to make a note of our April program. A month from now at 7 p.m. Sunday, April 7th, the award-winning photographer Max Hirschfeld will speak from Washington, D.C. about this extraordinary 2019 book, Sweet Noise, Love in Wartime, which brilliantly juxtaposes his photographs with the actual love letters between the Auschwitz survivors who became his parents. The Zoom link will be the same as the one you're using right now, so please make every effort to join us again. That's 7 p.m. Sunday, April 7th. Max Hirschfeld, Sweet Noise, Love in Wartime. And Max is joining us today as well. So hi, Max. Randi Biederman was recommended to me after one of our beloved members, Gail Brenner, met her at a conference last year. I got my hands on the 2019 book that Randi co-authored with her husband, Mark Biederman, Schindler's Listed, The Search for My Father's Lost Gold. And I realized that, yes, indeed, we needed to invite Randi to present to us. Both of Mark's parents were survivors, a veterinarian and horse surgeon. Mark died in February 2021. And Randi is admirably continuing to tell his family's very unusual story. Randi Biederman comes to us today from her home in California. Randi will inscribe copies of the book to folks who buy it directly from her. The price is $20, which includes shipping. And I will put Randi's email address in the chat so you can copy it down and get in touch with her to get a copy of the book. It's my honor to turn the program over to Randi now. She'll speak for about an hour, after which she'll be happy to take your questions. You can put your questions in the chat area or ask to be called on to question her. I'm going to now make Randi the host, and she'll take it from there. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, David. I just unmuted myself and I'm going to see. Okay, I'm still unable to do screen sharing. Oh, I'm now the host. I should be able to screen share. Okay. All right, share. Okay, there we go. There's the book. This is what got me invited here. So thank you. I want to thank all of you for attending. It's always my honor to be able to share the story and to educate. I'm a I was going to say I'm a recovering high school teacher. I'm a re that too. I'm a retired high school teacher, and obviously, my goal is, to keep teaching. So here I am. I try to keep teaching. So oftentimes people will say to me, did you guys set out to write a book? And the story is absolutely not. What we started out to do was just uncover the family history. Um, my beloved late in-laws were both Polish Holocaust survivors who absolutely did not talk at all about their history, pre-American life. They just couldn't. And Mark, you know, you heard David, he was a smart kid, he went on to Michigan State. He got his undergrad in animal science, and then he did a veterinary degree and went on from there and did post-grad at Colorado State in equine surgery. And he was a smart young man. And when he was about 6 years old, he's looking around, he's at neighbors' parties, and he's saying to himself, Mom, Dad, I go to my friends' parties and they have aunts and uncles and cousins and grandparents, and I don't have any of that. And their answer was they were all killed. And that's what they said to the 6-year-old. And so he kind of learned that he didn't have any family and not to ask too many questions. And when he tried to ask questions, his parents would sort of say, you know what, we can talk about this when you're older. And here are my in-laws, both of blessed memory. Back in Poland, they were Hersh and Salomea. They emigrate to the United States and they become Harry and Sally. It's my Harry and Sally, when Harry met Sally. So anyway, this picture was taken at Mark's bar mitzvah. And sadly, less than 6 years later, Harry was dead. He died young. He ended up getting pancreatic cancer. He got very sick very fast and died without ever having that adult talk that he'd always promised Mark. He'd always said, when you're older, we'll talk, I'll tell you about my life. I'll tell you how I survived. Suddenly Harry's dead. And all of his stories, his history, his secrets, everything died with him. So here's this heartbroken teenager who will never learn the history of what happened to his dad. However, there was one story that for some reason his dad shared with him, and it centers on this coin. This Mercury had dime. And how the story came about was this was back in the old days. Mark was about 9 years old, so we're looking at about 1970. People still pretty much paid cash for their groceries. And Mark's in the grocery store with his mom. She pays for the groceries. She gets some coins back. And Mark's been a good boy. And no tantrums in the grocery store. So she gave him some coins. And he's going through his coins, figuring, okay, what am I going to do with this quarter? What am I going to do with this nickel? And it's like, whoa, look at this dime. I got a Mercury head dime. I'm going to start a coin collection. So he can't wait to get home. And he runs up to his dad and he's like, Dad, look, I got a really old coin. I'm going to start a coin collection. And just something about seeing his young lad with this enthusiasm and excitement about starting a coin collection that triggered Harry to say, oh, my family had a coin collection. back in Poland. We buried it in the backyard just before we got deported by the Nazis. And that was it. It was never mentioned again. The coins, it never came up in conversation. Mark never delved in and tried to pull more of the story out of his dad, as child of Holocaust survivors, he kind of knew, don't ask too much, just go with what you got. So life went on. Suddenly Mark's dad is gone. Mark's off at Michigan State in Lansing, and he's probably in his second year of vet school, and his mom calls and says, I think I want to move. I've had enough of living in the family home, and I think I want to get a condo. Mark said, you're probably right. It's a good idea. He says, I'll come home this weekend and we'll start kind of decluttering. So Mark shows up, some boxes, and he ends up going to his dad's nightstand with the intention of just cleaning it out. And he starts finding these pictures. And he's looking at these pictures. And he said, Mom, who are these people? Why does Dad have these pictures of these people? And Mark's mom says, oh, that's your grandmother and two of your dad's sisters. And Mark was like, Dad had sisters? I mean, that was the level of secrecy in the family that Mark had never seen the pictures and never even knew that his dad had sisters. And then he carried on, and there's Mark's dad with one of his sisters. And there's more pictures. Mark's dad with a sister. And then the three sisters. And Mark's just aghast that these pictures existed. He never knew about them. And the fact that there were these three girls, his aunts, whom he never knew about. And he sat his mom down. He said, okay, what can you tell me? And she said, not much. He said, well, do you know their names? And she said, no, I know nothing about them. All I know for sure is that they were all killed during the war. And at that point, Mark said, okay, you've got to sit down and tell me your story, which she did. And that's for another book. But she had an amazing story herself, which we touch on a bit in the book. But he sat her down and he said, what can you tell me about Dad? And she says, pretty much nothing. We just kind of had to let our past go. And she said, the only thing I know for sure is that his name was Haus Biederman and that he was from Krosno. Mark said, okay, gets the map out. Here's Poland. And if you look at the very bottom right of the screen, there's Krosno. Almost right on the Slovakia/Ukraine borders there and far southeast of Poland. And that's what she knew. He was from Krosno. So Mark said, okay, I'm going to see what I can find out. I'm going to start a letter writing campaign. So he presses his mother into service to start writing letters to Krosno City Hall, Vital Records Office, etc., Polish embassy, anyone he could think of that could possibly shed some light on his paternal family. And this began probably in about 1984. And at that time, Poland was still firmly in the grips of the Soviet Union. It was still a satellite state of the Soviet Union. So there was not a lot of, free flow of information between the US and Poland. And he never got any answers to anything he ever sent. And he sent huge amounts of letters. So, time went on. Whenever he had a minute, he'd send off another letter and not get a response. And then time went on. The Iron Curtain fell. Poland is suddenly no longer part of the Soviet Union. And I meet Mark. And he's telling me this story of his family and his pictures and the coins and I'm saying, "Well, what have you done so far? What have you learned?" And he said, "Pretty much nothing." Said, "I've written a lot of letters." So I say to him, "Well, but have you been to Poland?" And he said, "No, I haven't been." I said, "Well, you can go now pretty readily." And he's like, "Well, there were a couple things." Obviously, as the son of two Holocaust survivors, he had a measure of trepidation about going into Poland. Last time his people were there, it was not a lot of fun. And so I'm encouraging him. I'm like, "Come on." In my naivety, I figured, let's go. We can do this. You're going to be okay. I'm going with you. Like I'm going to be his protector in Poland. So I thought this was a great idea. So I had a friend that was a travel agent. I go to her and I'm like, "Rita, Mark and I want to go to Poland." And she was like, "Why? Why do you want to go to Poland?" And I'm like, "Well, genealogy search." I said, Mark's been trying to find out stuff about his family for a long time and just hasn't gotten anywhere. And so she said, "Okay, give me some time. I'll look into this." So at that point, she looked into it, and it was just, travel in and out of Poland was still a bit kind of dodgy, sketchy. So she said, "Why don't you fly? You can get a direct flight, Detroit to Frankfurt. Fly into Frankfurt, get a rental car, and drive." She said, "You can have a European vacation, you can have some fun, and then you can go into Poland and do your research." And I thought, yeah, cool. Okay, this will be great. So off we go on our big adventure. We fly the red eye overnight out of Detroit. We land in Frankfurt, go to the car rental place, pick up the keys at the kiosk, and then we go to collect the car. And this is the thing that they gave us. This is a kind of an Eastern European um, horrible car, you know. And so I go back in, I take the keys, I go back in. I said, "Somebody's made a mistake here. My friend booked this and she would not have given me something that looks like this." And the girl behind the counter, in her perfect German accent in English, said, "Our information is you are going into Poland." Yeah, so can I have a Mercedes? Can I have an Audi? Can I have a Beamer? Can I have something that looks like a car? And she said, "No, you can't. This is your choice." Apparently, things were so kind of lawless in Poland during the early days of Poland being independent that if you pulled into Poland with a reasonably new and attractive car with German license plates, it would be stolen. So they told us, "There's your car, take it or leave it." So we took it. The options were few. We took it. And off we went, and we're going down the Autobahn, and Mark did the first leg of the driving, and we're leaving Frankfurt. We're on the Autobahn, and people are just flying past us. And I'm like, "Mark, it's the Autobahn, honey. You can speed up." And he said, "It's floored. We're flat out. This is as fast as it goes." And it was 80 kilometers an hour, which you haven't been to Europe, it's 50 miles an hour. We were going 50 miles an hour on the Autobahn. I'm surprised we lived, but we did. I'm here to tell the tale. We lived. So then, we drive southeast through Germany. We go through Munich. We go through Bavaria. We went to Dachau, saw the first of many concentration camps. And then our next stop was we crossed the border and we went into Austria. And this is us in Salzburg. And, I couldn't resist. This picture isn't in the book, but I couldn't resist putting it here because, come on, were we not cute together? I mean, we were young and love and cute. And here we are smiling away in Salzburg. And, it was almost like the last time I think we smiled on this trip because the next day we crossed the border into Poland, which was pretty nerve-wracking. And then our first stop was Auschwitz. Here we were at the famous railway siding that led into Auschwitz II, known as Birkenau. And every time I look at this picture, I want to cry because I knew, I'd already become very close with my mother-in-law, and she told me the stories of her going through these gates. And it was it was a really, really difficult emotional visit. I cried, Mark cried, I still cry. And it was a pretty difficult place to visit, but it was really important for us in our quest to find knowledge about the family. So after Auschwitz, we piled back in the car and we went to Krakow, which we spent a couple days in because that was where Mark's mom was from. And fortunately, she was still alive to tell us the tale. And she told us about where her home was and how they were deported from Krakow to Plaszow, and about her life in Plaszow, Krakow ghetto. And so we wanted to see all of this. And when we were ready to go to Krosno, which was just about an hour southeast of Krakow, both of us were kind of emotionally spent. And at that time, the roads weren't really great in Poland. The infrastructure was terrible. The signage was awful. We weren't even sure we were going to find Krosno. So we ended up hiring a driver, and his name was Mishkel, and he showed up one morning at our hotel and took us off to see Krosno. And the whole way he's driving, we're telling him the story. And then, we get to Krosno. And his English was great. And obviously he's Polish. He's fluent in Poland. He gets us to the city hall and he just kind of drops us off and sends us in. And I'm saying, Mark, why isn't he coming with us? Like, couldn't he help translate? Because Mark's Polish was certainly not anywhere close to fluent. He could kind of pick up words and phrases, but his parents were always very adamant that he not learn Polish. He grew up speaking Yiddish, but not Polish. So we get there and he's trying to communicate with these people. And I'm like, why don't I get Mishko, bring him in? What are we paying this guy? He drove us here. He's kind of just dumped us on the steps. So, and we were not having a good time with the Poles. I know a couple of you have read the book and you know that it was a very unpleasant time in Krosno. Any questions we asked, they were like, no, go. And they were, closing the kiosk screen on us saying they're closed, lunch begins at 10 a.m. We didn't get anywhere with them. And then I go out and I'm like, Mishka, what's going on here? Like, why is everybody being so awful and rude? And why aren't you coming in with us? And he was like, well, I don't really want to get in the middle of this. And I'm like, and he said, number one, he said, we have been under the Soviets for generations. We've learned not to say too much, share too much, or be too friendly. Mind your business, keep your head down. And the other thing, he said, the only people that we have coming here looking for family information are Jews. And everybody's very worried that Jews are going to come back, find their family homes, find their family businesses, and try to reclaim them. He said, I hate to tell you, you're not going to get a lot of help from anybody here. I'm like, great, okay. That's good to know. It was good to know because at least we knew where we were at with these folks. A, they didn't like us. B, they weren't going to give us any information. So, okay. Better armed with knowledge. So Mishkel took us to a few more places. We went to post office to see if there were postal archives. It was about as friendly there as every other place in Krosno. So then Mishkel's next suggestion was, let's go to the Jewish cemetery. So he takes us to the Jewish cemetery and says, why don't you walk around in there and see if you can find a headstone with the Biederman name on it. At least it'll help you know that you had family here. And it was like, look at this place. I mean, the weeds were, at least 2 feet high. The markers were all kind of toppled and almost unreadable. So that was a debacle. And I was like, okay, well, that was it. It ended up in many ways, it felt like a wasted trip to Crosno. And I felt really bad about it because this was my idea. I'm like, gosh, we're going to go and we're going to get the records. And we came away with nothing, nothing. And so I felt really terrible. But at least I guess one of the things was we realized how uncooperative the authorities were going to be. So we get back in our car and we head off and we leave Krakow and we headed to Berlin, which actually was a really good experience. The Berlin Wall was still in places up when we were there. So I've got some great pictures of a crumbling Berlin Wall. We saw the reconstruction in East Berlin, and we went to the Wannsee Conference House, which was the place in 1942 where the Nazis came up with the final solution. And the Wannsee Conference House is now a museum and archive. And we were able to find some amazing, amazing, amazing information there about Mark's mother's family. Nothing incredibly about the dad's family, but we found out a lot of stuff about Mark's mom's family. So, I mean, there was something worthwhile in the trip. And then we headed back to Frankfurt, turned our lovely car in, and flew back to Detroit, with the knowledge that it wasn't going to be a real easy thing to try to go any further with this. The letter writing campaign was a failure. Trip 1 to Poland, not a complete failure, but, not great. So, Mark goes back to equine medicine. I go back to teaching high school. Time passes. And then 2 things happen kind of almost in tandem that changed everything about our search. Number 1 was the internet. Yes, we were so early on with this search that we didn't have internet access. And suddenly, here we are. We get unlimited AOL access for $19.95 a month. And we had the phone in the cradle, and we used to have to put it in there and dial up and hear the screech. But it was an absolute boon for us because suddenly we had immediate access to knowledge that we just couldn't have before. And I mean, the internet was burgeoning. There were Jewish genealogy sites, there were chat sites, there was places where you could, enter in some questions and wait for people to answer back. I mean, we were just, in our glory, suddenly got the internet. And the other thing that happened that changed everything really for us, we had a few serendipitous things happen that info just dropped in our lap. And one of them was one of Mark's horse clients, really high-end trainer named Jack Darling, who was also not Jewish, but also a World War II history fan. One night he was watching a documentary on the making of Schindler's List, the movie. And they panned across the list and he saw the name Biederman. And he's like, gee, that's my vet's name. So he called Mark up and he said, Mark, was there any chance that your dad was a Schindler's List survivor? And Mark said, well, he never said, but he never said anything. So who knew? But hey, what do we have? The internet. So Mark goes online and pulls up. There's the first page of Schindler's List. Prisoner number 3, Biederman, Hirsch, 7/9/25. Mark's dad's birth date, 7th of September, 1925. And Mark's like, God, my dad's a Schindler's List survivor. And I mean, I consider this serendipitous for so many ways and reasons. I mean, there are 1,200 people on this list. If his dad hadn't been like number 3, like as the cameras panning by, if he was buried at 963, we would never have known this, and our search would have been stalled. But here we are. Somehow, somebody in the universe put Mark's dad at number 3. And we scan over, and there it is, front and center. I was like, wow. So Mark's like, okay, this is huge for a number of reasons. We were at this point in the early mid 1990s. A lot of these folks were still alive. So Mark goes online immediately, and he's finding Schindler's List survivors chat sites. And he posts something saying, did anyone know Hersh Biederman, who was on Schindler's List, who was from Krosno? And within days, he gets a response from this gentleman, Alexander Bialowitz, changed his last name to White to become a doctor. Alex was a Schindler's List survivor, number 269 on the list, and he had been Hersh Biederman's bunkmate. They were about the same age, and he was his bunkmate. So he immediately writes back, and he said, yeah, Hersh Biederman, I knew him well. We were bunkmates. We were together. And, but he said, the Hersh Biederman I knew wasn't from Krosno. He was from Łódź. And Mark's like, that can't be right. The one thing my mother knew about my dad was he was from Krosno. So there's got to be a problem here. And Alex said, you know what? Send me a picture of your dad, the oldest one you've got. And this was, I believe, the passport picture that Mark's dad used when he came over from Europe to the US. So it was the oldest one he had. He sent this to Alex and said, here's my dad. And Alex said, yep, that's my Hersh Biederman. He's from Łódź. So Mark's like, well, so he goes to his mom and he said, Mom, Dad's from Łódź. She said, no, he's not. No, he's not. So, I mean, the good news is, though, if he was from Łódź is, you know, a big city. Krosno was like this little outpost, this tiny village. Łódź, big city, biggest, you know, second biggest city in Poland, right behind Warsaw. And there were a lot of survivors that came out of Łódź. So there was, you know, a pretty good chance somebody may have known him. So he presses his mom into service once again and says, Mom, I know you don't believe he's from Łódź, but you know, you're connected with the survivor community. Start asking around. See if anybody from Łódź knew Dad. So she grudgingly was like, okay, I'll ask. So she'd ask, you know, people here, people there, some, okay. And everybody in Detroit was like, yeah, no, what are you even asking? He was from Krosno. I mean, that's how entrenched the history was. He was from Krosno. So we're coming up on serendipitous event number 2. It was March of 2001. And we were in the throes of a really nasty Detroit winter. And Sally'd had enough. So she said, I'm going to Florida. I'm spending the month. So she goes to spend a month in Florida. And she just went. She had so many friends that had places down there. She went from place to place to place. And one day she was in Boca Raton. And she decided to go to a deli and get a snack for lunch. So she goes up to the counter, puts her order in, you know, gets her tray with her pastrami and her black cherry cola, turns around to go get a table to sit at. And she sees a man sitting at a table, and he's reading a Łódź newsletter. There were, in fact, so many survivors in the US that came out of Łódź that they used to put out a quarterly newsletter called the Ledger. So she sees this guy reading a Ledger. She's like, oh, how can I resist? So she goes, she says, can I sit with you? And they talk. And she said, you know, my son has this idea his dad was from Łódź. I don't really think so, but any chance you knew Hersh Biederman? And he looks over at her and he says, yeah, I knew him. I mean, how does this happen? She's in a deli in Florida. So he writes down his name, Izzy Olivac, gives their number, gives it to her and says, when you get back to Detroit, give your son my number. I'll talk to him. So of course, Mark can hardly wait to call Izzy. And he calls Izzy, and Izzy was not in the greatest of health and not really eager to talk too much. But, Mark's trying to draw a bit out of him. And he's, in frustration, he finally says, well, hey, Izzy, would you happen to have an address on my dad? And Izzy says, yeah, Zaglarska 7. And Mark's like, after all these years, you remember the address? And Izzy says, well, yeah, we were next door neighbors. So here we are. I come home from work and Mark says, we're going to go to Poland. I'm like, oh God, I had such a good time last time. We're going to Poland? And he said, yep. But here we're going now to Łódź. And if you see, Łódź is right in the center of Poland. If you look at Poland right below the D. So we're planning a trip to Poland. Mark said, I got to see where my dad grew up. I've got an address. Do you know what a big deal that is? And what about those coins? So we plan the trip to Poland and off we go. And it was with a lot of trepidation that I was going to Poland. I just really did not want to go back there. I didn't have a good time the first time. Didn't want to go back, but I thought, okay. So off we go. And we did the same thing. We flew into Frankfurt. We got a better car this time, though. We were a number of years into Poland being independent, and I guess the crime level had settled down. So we got a real car this time. And we drove to Łódź. And as we're pulling into Łódź, all I can see is graffiti everywhere. I mean, horrible. I just, and here's the next. I mean, it was everywhere, all over the place. And I'm like, I didn't want to be here. Now look at what I'm looking at. So anyway, probably about a year ago, I spoke at a library in California, and a Polish lady came up to me and she said, are you sure, it was 2001? Are you remembering it correctly? Because, I just don't think it's that anti-Semitic in Poland anymore. And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, you're right. It's been a few years. It's been 20 plus years. Maybe my remembrance of it is off. So, I said, well, I'll look into it. So I did. So I come home and hey, I got the internet, and now I have really good, cable internet, and I can pull things up real fast, not like the bad old days with the modem. So I looked and I punched in, anti-Semitic graffiti in Łódź, and I come up with an academic paper written by a woman named Helene Sinrich. And she did this as part of her PhD paperwork. She was getting a PhD in comparative history. And it's titled Reading the Writing on the Wall, a Textual Analysis of Łódź Graffiti. And it said, one of the most prominent features of Łódź, the second largest metropolitan area in Poland with a population just short of 1 million people, is the mass of anti-Semitic graffiti. Swastikas, Jewish stars, anti-Jewish slogans cover the walls of buildings and other structures throughout the city. At the railway station, in underground walkways, courtyards, entrance halls of apartment buildings, on cemetery walls, on church properties, and on the sides of public and private buildings. The extents of anti-Semitic graffiti stretch into the surrounding villages and communities for miles around. So yeah, I guess I wasn't exaggerating. Poland's still scarily anti-Semitic. And I've known people that have gone on the Poland and then on to Israel tours, and they're saying, well, I didn't really see that. And I'm like, I think that when you go on the tours, they're pretty careful to kind of insulate you from stuff like this. But believe me, it's out there and it's scary. So anyway, that was my rant about Poland. So I didn't want to leave the house. I mean, I didn't want to leave the hotel. I was really, really nervous about doing any kind of walking about or exploring in Łódź. And finally, Mark talked me down off the rail and said, look we've come this far. I got to go and see if I can find my dad's home. There's been a war, there's been a Soviet takeover, there could have been urban renewal. I don't even know if the house is still standing. I don't know what's going on with the neighborhood. So we leave, we get in the car and we drive north of the city, and here's Zaglarska Street. And I'm like, wow, there's cobblestone and the houses look pretty old. I'm like, okay, there hasn't been any urban renewal here. So we're walking down the street and there it is. Zaglarska 7, the Biederman home in Łódź. We found it. And here's pulled back, Biederman home on the right, number 7, next door, the Oliveck house, number 9. Look a bit rough, but I figured 1939, those were, probably pretty nice homes. And there's that yard on the side. And Mark and I are like, wow, I tend to be pretty outgoing. In many cases, I just go knock on the door and say, hi, my family used to live here. Can we walk around and dig in your yard a little? But I thought, having seen all that graffiti, I really didn't think it would be a good thing to knock on the door. So we didn't. We just kind of took this as a, we were on a reconnaissance mission. Yes, we found the house. It's still standing. The yard looks relatively untouched. Where do we go from here? And we really didn't know where we were going to go from here. And one of the things we were figuring was that, well, if the coins are still there, they're probably buried really deep. We're not exactly going to be able to go to Radio Shack and get a metal detector. And then we're back home. And Mark was watching a documentary, and it was about Yaron Sforé, an Israeli journalist that kind of made his name finding plundered Nazi treasures. And his crew were using a ground-penetrating radar to find things that were buried. And the people were asking, well, how deeply can a ground-penetrating radar detect stuff? And he said, I can find a fork buried more than 3 feet deep. And Mark's like, that's it. That's it. I need a ground-penetrating radar. So at the time, Mark's cousin, Arik, was worked for the government. He was a deputy minister of tourism in Israel. And he contacted Arik and he said, can you get Yaron Sforé's number for me? He says, better yet, I'll have him call you. 3 days later, Yaron's on the phone calling Mark saying, yeah, hi, it's Yaron. Your cousin said you wanted to talk to me. What do you want? So Mark tells him the story and Yaron says, wow, it's really interesting. Why don't you meet me in New York? I'm going to be in New York in July. Meet me in New York, and I've got a friend at Fox News named Pierre Kafka. Why don't we connect with Pierre at Fox News, and maybe we can draw Fox News in, and they'll want to kind of maybe fund the search. And so off we went to New York in July, and Mark's telling Pierre Kafka the story, and Pierre's like, sounds like a lot of Boba Masa to me. We're not interested. Thanks for coming. Interesting story. Every survivor kid thinks that there's treasure in the backyard in the old country. Says, give it up, go home. So off we went, and we took the elevator down. We're walking out from the Fox News stations. Yaron's following us, saying, "Wait, I got some other ideas." And we're like, "Oh, okay." So it was another disappointment, but we'd had many. So off we went, And Yaron did call Mark a couple times over the next few months saying, well, I got this idea and that idea. Most of them were just way too fanciful for us to even like they were all going to cost us money, like large sums. And I don't know, we were at that point, we didn't even know if the coins were still there, if the coins were ever there. I mean, who knows? In the craziness of December 1939, as people were being, deported from their homes, who knows what they did. So we just didn't want to invest anything. Then time goes on. April 21st, 2004. Yaron calls Mark on his cell phone. Mark's on a farm call, looking at a horse. And he says, Mark, I want to let you know, we're in Łódź. I'm here with Pierre and the Fox News team, and we've just dug up your family's coins out of the yard at Zaglarska 7. The good news, coins were there. The bad news, Mark got closed out of this, and Pierre Kafka, who told him it was all Bobamasa, ended up there. The explanation that came up after was that Pierre and Yaron were in Łódź for the commemoration of the 60th anniversary of the liberation of the Łódź ghetto, and they were meeting all of the Łódź dignitaries and mayor and city council, and they just kind of thought, got nothing to lose, and they floated the idea of, one of our contacts in the US said his family used to live here and there could be a coin collection in the backyard. And they said, can we get permission to dig up? And they said, dig to your heart's content. So they did show up with ground penetrating radar and dug several holes, and the 5th one was the charm. They dug up a white ceramic teapot with 63 gold and silver coins from the 1700s and 1800s, and they were all from the Netherlands. And this is one of the news clips. Son finds Holocaust survivors' treasure. Not quite son, but kind of close. So anyway, there's my marquee with the pictures of the dig and the pot. And so of course, Mark gets the first flight out, and back by 2004, he could readily fly directly from Detroit into Warsaw, which he did. And then he got a train. And actually, let me backtrack a bit. After Yaron finished telling Mark the story, he handed the phone off to a newspaper reporter named Joanna Podolska. And Joanna said, are you coming? I'd like to talk to you. I want to meet you. Let's, connect. And Mark said, okay, give me your number. So they connected, and Mark flies to Warsaw, takes a train to Łódź. Joanna and her crew, her news crew, pick Mark up from the train station and take him around. And this was Joanna's article in the Łódź Gazette. And there's Mark looking at the coins and family pictures, etc. And the coins are currently held. They were immediately confiscated by the Polish authorities, and they're being held in the Museum of Archaeology and Ethnography in Łódź, Poland. Pretty big disappointment for us. Poland is very reluctant to hand anything over ever. Mark's cousin, who was the deputy minister of tourism, is now retired from the Israeli government, and he's kind of taken it on as his project to try to get Poland to release these coins to Yad Vashem, because that seems like that would be a really fitting place for these to be. He was having some reasonable success getting some people's interest and enthusiasm, and then October 7th ended everything. I mean, everybody's focused elsewhere now, obviously, but I'm hoping at some point there will be again some ability to get the ear of some prominent Israeli politicians and just it's kind of going to be, obviously I go out, I speak about the story and the coins, and I've never wanted to personally own these or have them or keep them. I really think they belong in a Jewish museum. And I really think Yad Vashem would be the perfect spot for them. And that's where we're at with that because everybody's like, oh, the coins, aren't you mad? I'm mad that they've kept them. And I'm mad that they're unwilling to even discuss that they should not be there. They think, okay, they were found in Poland, they're ours. They're really not. But we're working on it. Joanna Podolska ended up staying in touch with Mark for quite a long time. And what she ended up doing, she takes, after several days in Łódź, she takes Mark back to the train station and said, I know this didn't turn out the way you wanted. I'm kind of really disappointed that the Poles are holding on to the coins because it's kind of the last tangible piece of property that your family owned that, this family that you lost and never knew. So she said, is there anything I can do for you? And he said, yeah, there is actually. He said, I know nothing of my father's sisters. Turns out my dad's from Łódź. You're a reporter in Łódź. Do you think you could get me information about the girls? She said, I will see what I can do. 6 weeks later, in the mail, we get top left-hand corner is the marriage certificate for Mark's paternal grandparents. And then there are the 3 birth certificates for the girls, Sarah, Sipra, and Pasha. Mark now has evidence of who these girls were. So it took him from 1984, when he first found the pictures of the girls, to 2004, 20 years of research. Learned the history, found the girls' names, found the coins. And that is the culmination of the story. So anyway, that's it. So thank you for listening. And hey, should I click on the chat button and see, have we stories? Oops.
Thank you.
Question?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear me? Okay, first of all, not only is this an extraordinary story, but you have an entertaining way of telling it.
Oh,
So we really appreciate that. A couple things before we move on to questions. I want to give a shout out to our dear friend, Councilman Norman Carter, who's a councilman in Snellville, Georgia, and a former Philadelphia cop. One of these days, we'll do a program with you, Norman. I don't know, we'll figure out a way to make it happen. I also want to give an opportunity to Andrew Bach to tell us about something that he's involved with. This is also tangential to the subject, but I wanted Andrew to have a chance to talk to us. So you have the floor, sir.
Oh, well, thank you, David, for giving me a chance to say a few words. My name is Andrew Bach, and first of all, I just want to say that I was surprised by just how emotional I became listening to you speak for the last hour, and I want to thank you for your presentation. Part of that is because of the parallels to my own journeys in the 1980s and 90s in Czechoslovakia, not Poland. uh, regarding my father's family. So my father escaped in March of 39 with his parents, and they ended up in Haifa in May of 39. And so I've been going and living in that part of the Eastern Europe for some years, since the 1980s. And
Andrew, we can't see you. Is there a way that you
yeah,
can turn on your
it
camera
says my
there?
video is, let's
We're happy to
see.
hear you, but we also would
Yeah,
love to see.
let's see.
There
Hi.
you are.
Yeah,
There we
Okay.
are.
yeah. Hi.
Hi.
So I think the reason that David wanted me to be able to introduce myself is a project that I've become aware of and I'm involved with now, and that is the Jews of Czechoslovakia. The Jewish Museum in Prague is pretty well known, probably by all of us. But the Jews of Moravia had a 1,000-year history distinct from Bohemia. And there's a movement now to create a center for historical documentation about the Holocaust in Moravia, but more broadly, a museum of Jewish history in Moravia. And so this is kind of a public service announcement for those of you in my case, we have lots of documents that survived the war, and so I'm donating the documents to the new museum. It's a project which is in a temporary location right now in Brno, but they already have the plans to approve to build the permanent structure in Brno, which will be opposite the train station. So for those of you that have an interest in either, you might have documents or items from your family to donate to this project, or you might want to support the project, please reach out to me and I'm happy to tell you more about it. And I've already provided the the website address for this museum to David, but I'd be happy to provide it in the chat as well. And I think that was the reason that David wanted to give me the floor for a minute. So thank you again for the presentation. Like I said, I find myself quite emotional having heard your stories, and in a good way. So thank you.
Hey,
Thank you,
attending.
Andrew. Thank you very much. Simone Gorko, who is a past president of our organization when we had presidents, she has raised her hand to ask a question.
Randi, thank you for your presentation. It was really interesting and wonderful, and your trips into crazy Poland. My parents were from Łódź, and yeah, I mean, there were a lot of people from Łódź. There were like 300,000 Jews before the war. But the one thing that is helpful about being from Łódź is that the Germans kept really good records of the Łódź ghetto. And you have the names of the girls. And I'm wondering if you've looked at the records of the ghetto and to see if you can find anything.
They were never in the ghetto.
They weren't.
No, they were never in the ghetto. We have all of the, read the book, because we have a lot of the information on them now, and we knew exactly what happened. They were part of the deportations that were going on in December 1939. They were deported out of Łódź.
Okay.
So we know the girls were never in the ghetto.
Okay.
Yeah, but we do know what happened to them, and
okay.
just horrible. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, it's great that you're continuing.
It's what I do to honor them. It's all I can do.
And honoring them. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to reiterate, I posted in the chat area how you can order the book directly from Randi, and she will inscribe it to you. Any other questions?
Oh, I'm seeing in the chat, what year did you go back to Poland? The first trip was 1995. The second trip was 2001. And then Mark went back on his own several times in 2004. There's so much more to the story, which is why I'm going to encourage you to read the book. He actually, after this story broke, it was kind of a big deal in Europe and then across, much less so in the US, but it was big in Canada. And what had the wire services in Canada picked it up because we were actually living in Canada right then. And he was taken to he went back to Poland with Global TV, and they did a episode for their series called Past Lives, which was one of the most highly watched from that series. And so Mark went back several more times that I didn't go. And a lot of it was because I couldn't always arrange it because I was teaching high school. And can I go to Europe? No. But so he went back a couple times, once in April when the coins were found in 2004. And then he went back again in, I believe it was October 2004 when he went back with Global TV out of Canada. And I have an episode of him when he filmed in Poland. It was pretty emotional also. I don't know. I cry through all this stuff anyway. I'm always amazed I make it through my talk. Yeah, so anyway, okay.
Randi,
Yeah.
our friend Rosa Borg, who is coming to us in the middle of the night in Malta, is asking if there's a petition or an email campaign we can join to support you in getting the coins to Yad Vashem. To please let us know, or to let her know.
Do you know what? Let me see what Arik's doing about this. Yeah, I would love to. If anyone has any ideas on how to do this, like he's trying to do this through the Israeli government. I mean, if we think we could get an email thing going, I would just love to, get some support or enthusiasm to do this.
Like I said, David has my details. So even if it's not now, if it's in the long term, just get in touch and I'll sign whatever needs to be signed.
Okay.
And share it.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the support.
It's just wrong. Because even though it was there, it's not theirs to keep. The Polish, I mean.
They think it is. So,
Speaking of which, how, just out of curiosity, how much do we think this is actually worth today?
Oh, uncirculated coins from the 17 and 1800s, who knows? I think they're highly, highly precious. And I mean, even if the monetary value, I mean, it's just, these are just so significant because of their history.
Yeah. Well, okay. We have greatly benefited from this program. All of us are indebted to you for taking the time and the effort to speak to us about this extraordinary book, which is available directly from its co-author. Just reach out to her at the website that I posted in the chat. And don't forget next month's program featuring the award-winning photographer Max Hirschfeld, Sweet Noise, Love in Wartime, story about his parents who were survivors of Auschwitz. Max himself grew up in the South, That is the deep South. He grew up in Alabama. It's not exactly near Snellville, Norman, but it's close. It's closer than Philadelphia. That's it for today. Thanks, everybody. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you,
and
Randy.
It's been
Oh, you're welcome, and thanks so much. I always
Thank you, Randy.
appreciate the ability to share the story. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And
thanks,
if you have any
everybody.
other groups that you belong to that would like to hear it, I'm here. Got my
Thank you.
email.
Thanks to
Contact me.
everybody.
Thank you.
We appreciate that everybody took the time to join us today. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Good
Thanks,
night.
Randy. Good night.
Good night.